Okay, good morning. Welcome Monday Morning Managers Meeting, January 25th, 2016. Reminder from home office as we get towards the end of January, having to do with your investment clients. Just a reminder from home office that on Primerica Shareholder Services, all the year-end statements are available. Any tax forms, that kind of thing are available. Any of your clients that have signed up for e-notification will be emailed any tax forms that they need. If they're mailing them out from our home office, the paper statements, everything has been mailed out. So if you get any calls from clients asking about where their statements are or any tax forms, they're in the mail. They should be there by the end of the year. But if somebody doesn't have one, you can go to Shareholder Account Manager and you can print those out for your client as well. A couple of things coming up here in the local office here in Baton Rouge. Lockwood tomorrow afternoon is having a special meeting here for anybody that's interested in learning how the Primerica Freedom Portfolios work. And that'll be here at our office tomorrow from 1 to 3:30. So anybody in South Louisiana, certainly in the co-op, if you have agents that are interested, make sure they're here from 1 to 3:30. That'll be tomorrow. Then Wednesday, if you're in the area, we invite you to be here as well. We'll have a Bible study at 9 a.m. Following that at 10 a.m., Greg Stribe from the home office will be in here. He'll do some specialized training on auto and home, debt resolution, and the legal protection program as well. So a great opportunity to come and meet some of our partners that help us out from the product side and help us build our business with that. So jot those things down and try to be here if you can. A few things to jot down too for dates. Next big Super Saturday up in New Jersey at the Hyatt Morristown. That'll be April the 2nd. Your guest speakers for that, Jake and Mitzi Frugier. Next two-day Fast Start School here in Baton Rouge. Dates on that are May 27th and 28th. That'll be at the Crown Plaza Hotel. We'll have more information on that coming soon, but get those dates down now and start getting that out to your teams. A few things in the news, and this is something you've seen in many news stories on TV. Glenn Williams hit this when he was at our event the weekend before last. But these first two slides, guys, take in these first two slides, and if nothing else, this should be great recruiting tools for you. But think about it. 2 out of 3 people that you see walking around on the street today do not have enough savings to cover a $500 emergency. That's 2 out of every 3 people that you see today couldn't come up with $500 if they had an emergency. Watch this. Another study out last week. 1 out of 3 says they're worse off financially now than they were a year ago, and 4 out of 10 say they're about the same. So that's 3 out of 4 adults no better off today than they were a year ago. They're either the same, which is really not getting ahead, or they're worse off. Only 20% say they're better off now than they were a year ago. Think about those two slides. Is that a pretty good recruiting tool right there? Think about it. Most people you see no better off now than they were a year ago, don't have $500 they can put their hands on today. Guys, they need our opportunity. Would you agree? Watch this. 7 out of 10 Americans say they're scared of talking to a financial advisor. 7 out of 10 scared. So here's what we need to know. What are they scared of? Because if we can overcome what they're scared of, maybe we can help them. Here's the number one thing they're scared of. Half of them say cost. Cost is the top concern. They say they're scared that talking to a financial advisor is going to end up costing me a lot of money. That's what they think. Guys, you understand a lot of companies out there still charge $500 to $1,500 to put together a game plan, the financial needs analysis, what we do, complimentary, doesn't cost a penny. So obviously, if that's the number one concern, shouldn't we be able to overcome that? We gotta get in front of them. Doesn't cost anything. It's free for that financial needs analysis. So we ought to be able to take advantage of that and put them at ease. Now, stock market, talk about that real quick. Obviously, stock market has been off to a pretty rough start this year, right? Everybody agree? But we need to, as Bill talked about the Fast Start School, we got to learn to comfort our clients as well, okay? We got to make sure that they're okay. And there's a story on CNN Money you might want to pull up, but it gives you some things to maybe use when you're talking to a client. See, a lot of people now are saying, don't want to invest in the stock market because it's down. Well, when would a good time to invest be? Yeah, exactly. So they don't understand. So we need to know how to talk to them, how to comfort them, how to make them feel better. So the article was, how scared should we be? Now, the average investor is down about 9% so far this year. Okay? But, look at that but Market's up about 200% since March of '09. So somebody been investing with you for the last 5, 6 years, up 200, down 9. But they're probably going to call and be concerned because they're down 9. But we need to be able to explain to them, yeah, but up 200. Would you take that trade off? Up 200 over the last 6 years? Down 9 right now, you're still way ahead. Goes on to say the recent pullback's a minor haircut, not a decapitation. Then it says, is the world and the U.S. on the verge of another 2008 crisis? That's when the stock market had that 40% decline. So is that going to happen again? Here's what the article says. Highly unlikely. Banks and individuals have less debt and more cash on hand than they did heading into 2008. In fact, companies right now are sitting over $1 trillion of cash. That's $1 trillion they did not have back in '08. Remember when they had to come in and bail a lot of these companies out? The government did to keep banks, insurance companies from going under. They didn't have the cash. Now they have the cash. So very unlikely that's going to happen. Then it says, are we headed for another recession? The answer here, very unlikely. It talks about the U.S. and China. The U.S. and China are the two big players in the world economy. It talks about the U.S. has had 2 years of job growth. The Chinese government says their economic growth was about 7% last year. What's really hurting it, the article goes on to say, is price of oil. Price of oil was over $100 a barrel. Now it's $20-something a barrel. You remember paying $4 and something a gallon 2, 3 years ago? Now it's $1.50 a gallon, okay? That's part of what's hurting it. So again, we just need to comfort them. This is just a normal cycle. The market goes up, it goes down. But now, Warren Buffett again has been, if you read on the internet, what's he been saying lately? He's buying. He's buying. He's done pretty good, wouldn't you say? So you buy when things are on sale. Now we just get out there and help people. As we wrap up today, I always like to let you know where our Primerica family is and kind of what they're doing. And this weekend, all right, look, Jake and Mitzi Frugier go to do an event for John and Patty Lavin up in Pennsylvania. Well, you guys know what happened this weekend up in the Northeast, right? Had that blizzard. So they got kind of snowed in. But look, Jake was ready. Check these silk jammies out. And look at these footies. He's got little red footies on, too. So he was ready. He was ready for the blizzard. Meanwhile, Bill and Blake were down in Florida doing an event for the Hobbs and to hit a PGA National golf course, little holes there, a little 3-hole stretch called the Bear Trap. Really tough to get through that thing. So there they are. Now, where would you rather be? Pennsylvania, or would you rather be down here? Looks pretty good. Another big event this weekend up in Detroit. Ian Pruckner was on hand. He was here just a week or so back from the hierarchy. Jim Coker there as well. You ever notice Jim Coker never changes? What hair he does have is always jet black. You think no gray hair? Yeah, it's amazing. How in the world is that? He's a hairy guy. But wait a minute. How is Jim in Detroit? I thought he was in Florida with Bill and Blake. Bring that picture back. Yep, there he is. I thought Jim was there. I thought I saw him in that picture. Said he's a hairy guy. All right, guys, that's what's happening with our Primerica family. Let's continue on now with the Monday Morning Managers Meeting. If you would, let's give it up for our head coach, Bill Whittle. Oh, Coker. Oh, Coker.
Good job, Michael. Sorry about that. I had a little technical difficulty. My shirt didn't come off or nothing, so we're okay with that, right? Everybody got me? Somebody pull that right there if you don't mind. So I want to make sure I announce this now before we get started, because I don't want to be jumping all over the place this morning, but I can tell you up front, I'm going to be jumping all over the place. So I'll tell you that up front in advance. So if you think this is a little strange, because I've got 2 books. So if you want to start your note, and by the way, we had a great time. We were down with the Hobbs, and it's just amazing the talent in this company. I mean, I'd known the dad, hadn't really known the sons that much, but I got a chance to know them one down there. Just absolutely incredible talent. Peter Snyder came down, was with us there, so it was just fantastic. And so my whole session today is going to be, because as I was down there, what really inspired me to do this meeting was Kevin Kinnerson. When he did the, we ready, Matthew? When he did his speech or his talk, how many of y'all are at the Fast Start School? Okay, one of the things that impressed me, and one of the things that I always watch, do people continue to grow? I mean, some people, it's kind of funny how, anybody in this room ever learned how to read? Okay, about 3/4 of this room. Well, there was a lot of y'all know Larry Waddell. One of the most, I think one of the speeches that I heard early on that made so much sense to me was he talked about in school. How do y'all remember the first time you started writing? Anybody remember Okay, we didn't probably write right away. You printed. But how many of y'all remember that the pencils they gave you? Most time we start off with crayons, right? But then the pencils are like they're so big you put them over your shoulder. You know what I'm saying? And then the paper, they didn't have any lines, or if they did, the lines were this far apart. You know what I'm talking about? Then they kind of getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And they get my age, you want them to get bigger and bigger and bigger because you want to get that print back up. But it got to where you start off this, and you start off and you wrote your A, and then you wrote B, and you wrote C, right? And then you learn the alphabet. Then you learn those small words like it and if and the or the, however you say it, of, right? You learn those little small words. And then you started progressing to bigger words: stop, traffic, things like Paul migrated toward about his senior year in high school, car, K-A-R, cats, K-T. But you know what I'm talking about? And you started learning your alphabet, then you learn syllables, then little small words, and then you learn the big O words, and now you can, if you learned it right, which I never really did, I cheated too much at that point in my career, my life. But then you learned how to spell big words by putting the letters together. Would you agree? Same thing with speaking and stuff. Then you learn how to read, okay? And then I use this sometime. We think about a lot of people can read a letter. Would you agree with me on that? You can read words, and some of y'all can read relatively fast. So you can maybe read a sentence at a time. But then, if you practice long enough, you take speed reading course, you can read a paragraph at a time and sometimes pages at a time. But think about that. We're all capable of learning how to read faster, speed read, right? But how many times you ever hear this? I'm just not a very good reader. So what really happened was you got the capacity to be a great reader. You just stopped growing in that aspect of your life. Everybody got me on this? So we all have the capacity. We all are capable of reading at a much faster pace. So you can take courses. I was dealing with a friend of Lauren's last night. He was at the house. We came back and we were talking about speaking. We couldn't figure out, like Bentley's 3. And we were saying, okay, should he be speaking fast? Should he be slower? Monet, she was speaking on a 10th or 11th grade level when she was like 2. Right, if you know Collis's daughter. And so some kids, and we think, okay, what is it? They asked me, and I said, well, when I go to the playground, or I go to, Chuck E. Cheese, or I go to Chick-fil-A with Bentley, some of the kids who are 3 are speaking not as well as he is. Some of them are speaking much better than he does. Okay, does that make sense with his sentences and words and all that kind of stuff? Everybody got me on that? So you just kind of out there, but what makes that? Well, maybe somebody's emphasized it more. Does that make sense? Somebody's spent more time with them. Or maybe the kid just progresses at a different rate. Everybody with me on that? Right. But all kids have the capacity to grow unless there's something wrong with them. Would you agree on that? If there's something wrong with them. So one of Lauren's friends said he went through speech therapy until he was like an 8th grader. And we couldn't, this guy is so fluent, it's unbelievable. And we were talking to him last night. He said when he grew up in a household that one of his parents spoke English, but his other parent was a Kunas. So they speak that broken French. Everybody know what I'm talking about? Is that what it is, broken French? Or, huh? But you know what I'm saying? But so he would speak half one time that way and half the other time, so he never really could get it. Is everybody with me on that? Yeah. But now if you hear him, he speaks so fluently, it's unbelievable. Now, how did that happen? He had to have a course. He did something that made him better in that aspect of his life. Everybody, and so when Kevin was speaking, it got to me because when he walked down, not even 3 words. First of all, he's like a little button. You know what I'm saying? So he's cute. You know what I'm saying? Like that. I'm not trying to embarrass him, but and then when he started speaking, it was like, man, he just, huh? What? I don't have a mic. It came off. Oh, I see. What is this? I don't know. It's up here by my ear. I've spoke out of my butt before, but I don't know about speaking out of my ear, so I haven't been coming across.
Yeah, they were complaining that it was, that's
okay.
what happened. Yeah.
Okay, good. So what do I do, just change? What you got?
Sorry about that. They were all complaining. Yeah.
Oh, there it is. Okay,
yeah.
sorry about that.
Okay.
So you think they got any of that? No, they didn't. So anyhow, but I was thinking about that, and I was thinking about how important it is that you have the proper, because if you're going to grow if you're going to lead in business, you got to communicate. It's like, and I'm not obviously CEO of the company, so I'm not disagreeing with him. But when Glenn Williams said at one of our meetings, I think Blake repeated it, and he gave Glenn credit when he said that that the leadership is everything, but communication runs a strong second. Okay, but I don't agree with that because communication is just an aspect of leadership. Does everybody understand what I'm saying? You can grow in your communication skills. You can grow in your how to give a talk. And as I watch people at our Fast Start schools, whether it's Fab 5 or people come in from the outside, or now we're getting, we're working on getting your next speakers to the next Fast Start schools, one of the first things I ask the people when they bring up their name, I understand their numbers, but can they communicate? Can they hold a crowd? Can they, you see what I'm saying? Because when you get them to speak for 45 minutes to an hour or more than that, you got to be able to hold a crowd. You can't just have good information. You need to know how to present that information where you touch most people in the crowd. Has everybody got where they can relate to you? Has everybody got me on that? Or at least relate to the information. Well, Kevin, I thought, gave one of the greatest presentations, but part of it, I don't think you'll remember, and I'm not saying that you don't remember, but I'm not sure if you'll remember as much about his topic as his ability to communicate whatever he's speaking about. I mean, would you agree with that? But what did he say? He said that what he did was he had read over the last year, he read 300 books. When I see a lot of people speak, you can they get up there and they wing it, or they're just, they're just ranting and raving, or they're just giving a topic. And it's anywhere I speak around the nation, and they don't stay on topic. Does that make sense? It's because they're not prepared, but they also haven't prepared. Well, Kevin, I bet we could give him any topic, and because he was so well read, he could probably bring some of that information to the moment and deliver. Has everybody got me on that? But that's not my topic. My topic is growth. But it was the same thing with him. So, and it says growth, it says the active process or a manner of growing and developing. And I don't like the last part, so I like for you to take it off. It says gradual increase. But at the same point in time, that is true, because anytime you get good at something, you probably start out bad. That's what Bobby Weeson said. Just be willing to be bad. And you're going to see this today in growth. That's the reason a lot of people don't grow, because they're not prepared to be bad. They're not prepared to be embarrassed or not. But would you agree over time you should get better? Would you agree at anything, whether it's public speaking, whether it's giving a presentation, making money, keeping yourself in shape physically? Over your life, you should get better. Some saving money, right? So, but I do really, you should be increasing. But I don't like the word gradual. Does that make sense? So let's just use the word process there. And so, and Bruce Springsteen said, a time comes when you need to stop waiting for a man or a person, waiting to be the man or person that you want to become, and start being the man or the person that you want to be. In other words, you got to get started. You got to start growing. And we're in a leadership position, so your people aren't going to grow as far as you grow. Is everybody with me on that? Okay, so once again, I'm going to bounce through this thing, but let me read this to you. And if there's a new book out, I want to encourage you to go get it. I'm reading out of two. One is by Ken Blanchard and Mark Miller, Great Leaders Grow. Okay, and I want to encourage you to get it. It's a real simple read, real big letters. So it's real easy to read. And the other one is John Maxwell came out with Jumpstart Your Growth. It's just two little simple reads. This is more of a daily devotional, but it's really good. I think you'll enjoy it. This is it's just a quick read book. It's inexpensive, and you can get it and you read real fast. But it goes in, it talks here about, when it talks about growing, but it says, talk about potential. It says, I believe you can achieve, like your lifelong dreams and etc. And it says, but do you currently have the tools to do so? So remember, we start off the year with setting our goals. Everybody with me on that? We said goals demand change. Well, growth demands change. So change is all in here, right? And goals demand that you grow. So you got to have a goal to grow, right? So I'm going to cover that in a minute. But it says, I believe you can achieve it, but you have to have, so you have so much potential inside of you, but do you currently have the tools to do so? In other words, are you capable of growing? Do you have what it takes to grow? Do you know how to get better at what you do? Now, guys, these are incredibly important questions. Do you have the tools to do what you need to do? Are you getting better at what you do to improve your relationships, to reach your goals? How do you gain more depth and wisdom as a person? How do you overcome obstacles? Should you work harder, work longer, wait for things to get better? And the answer is, he says, is you have to. And remember, we talked about before something becomes habitual, it's got to be what? Intentional. So here's what he asked. And it was really neat because I hadn't read this book until now. Says the answer is that you need to have an intentional strategic plan for growth. And so I wrote in my notes, do I personally have a strategy for growth? Now, I'm a real big planner. So I've got my strategy goal, but for my goals, I know my game plan to reach my goals that I want to. But when he said that right there, I said, I don't have a strategic plan of growth. In my business, I do. Okay, so he's going to hit that. But in my personal life, I do a lot of things grow, but it's not strategic, right? It's not, I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. So then he goes on and says, he said, many people learn from the school of hard knocks, which is really, that's stupidity in reality. Difficult experiences teach them random lessons. Think about that. You learn it only because you go through it. Now think how stupid that one is, okay? But that's what most of us do. The hard way, and they change, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. He said, do you assume that if you just work really hard, you'll improve naturally? See, that's, I think for a lot of us, we think that. I just got to work harder. And that may not be the answer, okay? Because some of y'all are working hard the way it is. He said, I once believed that. Then I discovered that personal growth doesn't just happen on its own. We have to be strategic about it. We need to take complete ownership. Now, this is what gets most people, okay? We need to take complete ownership of our growth process because nobody else will do it for us. Now, a lot of people feel entitled, or they think somebody's going to come save them, or if I was meant to fly, God would put wings on me so I don't get on an airplane. If God wanted me to be rich, he'd be giving me to rich parents. I mean, we get all that BS, okay? And he goes on and says, if we want our lives to improve, we must improve ourselves. And it's got to be intentionally, right? So I wrote down some things to look at. Then he says, number one, you got to learn how to grow and develop yourself, okay, so that you got the greatest chance. This is pretty cool. You got to learn to grow and develop yourself so you have the best chance of becoming the person you were created to be. Intentional growth is what he's talking about, which will unlock the door to your potential. I'm going to give you the definition of potential. So what's the door that's going to open up your potential? Personal growth, intentional personal growth, right? And he says you have the chance to improve yourself through personal growth from this day forward. So once you hear it, you are now what? Accountable. Like hearing the gospel. Once you hear, you're accountable. So if you don't get better after some of this things today, it's on you. It's not because you didn't have it, you didn't know what to do. You just didn't do it, right? And he goes on to talk about, he says, what will it take for you to get started? Isn't that a good question to ask? What will it take for you to get started? So you ought to write that down. What will it take for me to get started? And we'll cover that a little bit with you. And then consistently set a time every day, at least for the next 90 days, and he keeps saying this, so I'm excited about it, to grow intentionally. So you got to have a plan. You're not going to do something because it's not a habit. So you got to get this done intentionally, strategically, write it down, have a plan, follow that thing religiously. Read and think about the inspirational quote of the day and etc. He goes on through this thing, okay? And he says, if you spend time growing on purpose every day for the next 3 months, he said, then you'll probably reach your potential, or at least know how to do it, all right? So let me read this to you, all right? So I'm sorry to jump around, but I got a lot of crap here I want to make sure I get done today, okay? And I hope I get a lot of feedback from across the country. So let me read potential. So it says, potential is having or showing the capacity to become or develop into something in the future, okay? Potential, having or showing the capacity to become or develop in something in the future. So we used to talk about a stud is nothing more than a dud that just decided to explode. So we got all of us, you might be a stud or a dud, right? Okay, with me on this? Okay, what's the difference? The stud used to be a dud, but they intentionally decided to what? Explode. So right now, you got the stud, you got the potential to be a stud, but you may be a dud, which means what? You just haven't exploded yet. But that doesn't mean you're not going to. You got the potential. Now, my personal opinion, he goes on to say some things about potential, and I'm not going to disagree with him, but it takes about how beautiful potential is, and the concept of beauty about being, you know, he said potential is one of the most wonderful words in any language. I was always taught to believe potential sucks. The last thing you want to be told is, dude, you got a lot of potential. Dude, you got a lot of potential. Dude, you got a lot of potential, which means what? You suck. Right? That means you could be somebody, but you ain't nobody, right? I mean, so, you know, that was the worst thing. That guy's got the potential to be somebody. Or that guy could be somebody if he lives up to his potential, her potential. He said it looks forward with optimism. Now, that's good unless you just stay as a dud all your life, knowing you could be a stud, right? And it says it is filled with hope, which is good as long as you're making progress. You're doing something about it. It promises success, provided you get off your butt and do something about it. It implies fulfillment, provided you get off your butt and do something about it. Okay, we're all God's children. We're just not taking advantage of who our Father is. It hints of greatness, provided you do something about it. Potential is a word based on possibilities, but it's also, you know, based on frustration, shame, lots of nasty words we could use, right? There's a lot of people in Enterprise America, they got the potential to be great, but they never ever do it, right? And then he asked the question, do you have potential? What's the answer? Absolutely. Now, the next question is what? Will you do something with it? And he goes on and says, since you're reading it, then he says this, and he asks the question again. Same, 2 different books, but he asks the question again. Here's what he says. Do you have a plan for your personal growth? And you ought to answer that today, yes or no. It's just a yes or no answer. Do you personally have a strategic plan for your personal growth? We're not talking about your business. We're talking about you, your personal growth. And then he goes on to give you some things how to do. Okay, now let me read this before I do. Okay, well, I'll go to this. Okay, so number 1, I wrote down, do you have a desire to grow personally? All right, because this is where it all starts with. If you don't have the desire to grow personally, you're not going to put the time, effort, energy to grow personally. It's not going to happen. So what are you going to do? You're going to stay the way you are. And you're going to blame, well, your color, your sex, where you came from, the fact you went to a certain school, your mommy and daddy didn't love you, they dropped in your head. But you're going to use everything because you're not going to hold yourself accountable. Does that make sense? So as long as you can look outside and you can blame somebody else other than yourself, you will not grow personally, all right? So ask yourself, do you have a desire to grow personally? Now, to me, this would be the next one, okay? Do you have a reason to grow personally? Now, to me, I came up with these, but you see how these go hand in hand? Is everybody with me? Because some of you ain't writing this stuff down. I don't think you're that smart. You're not going to remember all this stuff, okay? But think about the 2 right there. They kind of go hand in hand, would you agree? Do you have the desire and do you have a reason? Well, a reason is desire, but at the same point in time, I want you to think about this, okay? When I say the desire, are you waking up every day passionately? Okay, I got to get better. I got to get better. I got to get better, right? And what would make you wake up every day with that desire to get better? The reason, which is also a desire, is everybody with me on this? Because I know it gets a little confusing, but I think this is important, and you'll know by watching people. Do they read the books? Do they come to seminars? Do they take notes? Do they get better? So every time, say you speak, did you speak better than you did last time? Every time you go on a presentation, did you get better than you did last time? Every time you recruit somebody, do you do a better job of field training them than you did last time? Are you a better leader now than you were last year? Is your team still struggling and floundering around? Your investment, is your accounts growing right now? Are you in better shape physically than last night? Do you have better relationships than you had last year? See, what are your reasons? And so I think you ought to write those down, but I think you ought to answer these and be honest with yourself, okay? Look at the poor little Y in the first one. He didn't get capitalized. That's so sad, okay? Number 3, you have to have a plan for your personal growth. Now, I started off by, these were questions. Matt and I redid it this morning. So I wrote down, do you have the desire to grow personally? Next one is, do you have a reason to grow personally? And then I said, it said you're having to have, like trying to teach you, but you ask this, do you have a plan to grow for your personal growth? Now think about this, okay? To grow, okay, if you look at it as to grow, you got to know why. So if you look at the plan for personal growth, what would you have to do? You would have to be honest with yourself and look at yourself and do an autopsy and say, okay, what areas of my life personally do I need to grow at? Same thing with your business. I'm going to show you that in a minute, okay? But this is critical. This ties in with that right there. So you got to know why. So you're not going to develop a personal growth program, if you don't. Then you got to know, okay, what areas. So by looking at your life, maybe it's a motivation area, maybe it's a training. So write this down if you would. It's not in your notes, but write these down. These are the 5 things I teach all the time when I travel. Educate. Write this down. Educate, motivate, tolerate. Educate, motivate, tolerate, communicate, and build relationships. See, that's your job as a leader. Those 5 areas. So if you look at it, those are the 5 areas, probably somewhere in there, you probably need to get better. Tolerate means you put up with people, you love people, you accept people, you're inclusive, you don't judge people, you don't separate yourself from other people. Is everybody with me on that? Okay, so look at those 5 areas and ask, somewhere in there you probably have some room for growth, okay? And then know how. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that today. Okay, how do you actually grow in that in your leadership, right? So let me take you through a little thing. I think this will make a little sense to you. It's pretty cute. So he uses an example, and I'm going to come back to that stuff. It's not in your notes, so this is different. So he uses an example here. Says, now this is, I'm jumping around now. Okay, is everybody with me on that? So this is one of my jumps. Everybody good? Okay, I'm not totally lost. I'm just jumping around. All right. So he says, let's see, who can serve as a mentor? Okay, well, once again, remember what King said? Anybody can serve, anybody can lead if you're willing to serve. So once again, he's combining the both. Who can serve as a mentor? Who are you going to serve, right? What type of continuing education makes sense? What can you do to grow as a leader? So he's talking about growing as a leader, and I'm going to come back to this so remember that when I come back to this, okay? I'm going to give you the 4 ways to grow there, so it's going to tie into that one right there. Everybody with me? So I'm going to teach how. But let me go to this. He said you got to grow in knowledge. So write that down. You got to grow in knowledge, right? So, and he goes on and talks about, he said, one topic, growing as a leader, is probably going to, he said, growth is what separates this. It's one of my quotes here. Shoot. It's in your notes, okay? So don't worry about that. But go down where it says gaining knowledge. Everybody got me? You with me? Okay. It says growth is what separates living things from dying things. Organizations and people that are fully alive, okay, especially leaders. So if you're not growing, it's like Art Williams said, you're doing what? You're dying, okay? So if your business isn't growing, it's because as a leader, you didn't grow, so consequently your team didn't grow. Remember what Maxwell talks about, the law of the lid? Everybody with me on that? Remember we talk about, now watch, this is important you get this down. Write this down in your notes. It's what called, remember last week I talked about the integrity gap? The gap between what you say you do and what you're actually going to do, what you actually do, that's called an integrity gap. A value gap is what separates you and your people. Now, this is critical, guys. So a lot of people think the way you have a value gap or the way you lead is you don't spend any time with your people. No, what you're doing is you're trying to create a vacuum. It's sort of like this. And once again, like the law of the lid, that as you keep growing, okay, it creates distance. It doesn't mean you don't get close. A lot of the old way of coaching and parenting was the way you do is you don't get too close to your kids. You hear people say stupid things like, well, I'm not they're not their friend, I'm their parent. Well, you're an idiot, okay? Same thing you hear coaches say that, right? Well, you don't have to like me, but you're going to respect me. Nobody respects somebody they don't like. They may fear you, but that's not a way to run a team or a business or a family. So the way you create distance between you and your people, those who are following you, those that you're trying to influence, which you're going to see in a minute, is you grow yourself. When you start growing yourself, then what happens? People come to you because most people, they want to grow and they know to win, they got to grow. So if you're growing, now you're valuable to their people. So write down the law of the buy-in. And here's what the law of the buy-in. So this is the law of the lid. They're only going to grow as high as you go. So as you grow, now they can grow. And the faster you grow, the more valuable you are to more people. Okay, now watch this. Remember, there's a scale of 1 out of 10. Okay, a 10 cannot lead a 1. But a 1 can lead 2s, 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s, 8s, and 9s, and a ton of 10s. So the higher you move up, think about this logically, the higher you move up on the leadership scale, the more people should be below you, right or wrong. Because what is leadership? It's simply what? Influence. So go to that next quote over there. I don't know if it was in your quotes. Shoot. Do you have the quote on influence? You have that? Huh? Where is it? Oh, yeah, here it is. So go to that. It says, anytime that you influence the thinking, belief, or development of another person, you're engaging in leadership. My capacity to learn determines my capacity to lead. If I stop learning, I stop leading. Is everybody with me on this? Okay, now think about this, okay? So the more that you grow yourself from maybe a 10 where nobody's following you, because you don't add what to them? Value. So therefore you can't do what to them? Influence them, which is what leadership is. So if you understand leadership, what is leadership? Go back to this, it's influence. So anytime that you influence their what? Thinking, beliefs, and development of a person, you're engaged in leadership. So if your people are not influencing them like to read books, attend meetings, go out and pass a test, then you're not a leader. Does that make sense? But what's the good news? You can what? Learn. So that's what it's saying. So therefore you can grow. Okay, if you can learn, you can grow. So you got to always embark on learning. And so that's when he talks about all leaders are readers. All readers are, history makers are note takers, all that kind of stuff, right? So it comes down to this. So people, now watch, write this down because it's not in your notes. People, they say, are always going to give their money and time to someone and something. What's the only question? To who and to what? Leaders influence this. This is the value gap. Value mean what? They're the law. Remember the what? Buy-in. So when you think about buying into something, what do you buy into something with most of the time? Money. So you see an investment, say, well, I'm willing to buy in. You see a car, whether it may be a Bentley or a Chevrolet, okay? Well, if you see the value, you will pay that. I think the greens fees, what, $400 or $500 where we played this past weekend? Okay, so it means for a foursome, you're talking about $1,600, $2,000 just to play a round of golf. When you say that's stupid, well, it depends on how you value playing golf at a nice golf course. Everybody got me on that? Okay, but if you had the money and you valued that playing golf at a nice golf course, would it be worth $2,000 to you? Now, if you say, well, I don't like playing golf, then would you put up $2,000? Okay, so once again, it's the law of the buy-in. So here, people got their time and the money. That's what they're putting up. So if you don't have anything to offer, I'm talking about you now, as a leader, you're not going to create a value to them. Everybody got me on that? And they're not going to do what? Follow you, which means they're not going to allow you to influence them, and you're not going to grow a business or a team. So the more you raise your lid, everybody see where I'm going with this? The more value you have to more people, and so therefore you can do what to them? You can raise their lid, bring them from a 9 to maybe to a 6 to maybe to a 4, and now you should look around you and you should have a whole bunch of people below you that have what below them? Their teams, because you've raised their lid, you've created more value to them because you've influenced them, and now they can bring more value to others and influence others. You got a business. But what's it all come down to? You. If you don't grow you, so if you look around and you've been around here any length of time whatsoever, and you ain't got a team, you know what the good news is? You can start, what's the book say? When? Today. Now, realizing if it's going to be, it's up to me, it's all because I'm not growing personally. That's good news. Because y'all all told me that you're capable, you have the capacity, the potential, right? You're not a stud, but you're a dud, and all that means is you just ain't exploded yet, okay? And when's the time to explode? Now, okay? So I think this is good news. It shouldn't be no bad news, right? So let me show what he says here, okay? He says growth is what separates living things. Once again, we went through that, from dying things. And he says sometimes people in an organization aren't really alive at all, not at their fullest sense of the word. They're not fully alive because they are not growing. See? And when I heard Kevin speak, I thought, well, there should be no question of why the kid's that good, because what did he tell you he did? He read 300 books last year. Now, he may be embellishing that. Blake spends a lot of time with him, so he might rub off. Okay? But even if he's in 30 books, that puts him in rare air with most people, because you can tell when they speak they haven't read anything. They haven't grown. Is everybody with me on that? Okay? And that's true in leadership, the way you act. If you haven't read, haven't let anybody influence you, you're not changing your leadership styles. Okay, and it says, think of a heart monitor. If you're not alive, there's a flat line. Okay, does that make sense? I even talk about this with the economy. If you're not alive, there's a flat line. Look at your businesses. If your businesses aren't alive, in other words, if they're alive, what are they doing? Growing. Okay, if they're flatlining, or even worse, they're already in the grave, they're in the ground, it's because you're not, as a leader, are not growing. Okay, it says you're clearly not growing. Okay, growth brings energy. I would write these little acronyms down, or what's the word when you describe something? What's that called, ladies? Adjectives? Okay, good. I cheated on that too. Growth brings energy, vitality, life, and challenge. Growth. So if you look around, it brings what? Energy. It brings vitality. It brings life. And then along with that, it brings what? Challenge. It means you're continuing to climb. It's not about mastery, because remember, there's 2 steps to growth. Challenge and mastery. It's like climbing a mountain. Remember, we used that example? So I reach up to a piece of the mountain, and I hold on. I put my foot in a little hole and I hold on. That's mastery. I'm good. Or like climbing a ladder. I step on the first rung. Okay, I'm good. Then what am I supposed to do? Let go and start reaching. Okay, now that's a challenge. And then I get a little bit higher and I pull myself up. What is that now? Mastery. Then what I do? I don't sit there on the side of a mountain stuck. I reach up, but see, that's a lot of people in Primerica. They get into Primerica, they pass their test, okay? They made it to that level, and then they just sit there. Some people recruit 1 or 2, 3 people, make 1 or 2, 3 sales, learn a little bit about how to close, maybe a little bit about life insurance. Okay, that means they've mastered that, but they never keep going. They get to district, get to vision, or they even get to RVP. They make 100,000. But what do? They just sit there. But that doesn't work in Primerica. Doesn't work anywhere. Because if you're not growing, you are dying. Look how many people get to a $100,000 mark and they go backwards. Look how many people get to a $250,000 mark, they go back. Look how many people get to RVP, go backwards. SVP, go backwards. Rather than continue to do what? Grow, because they are not personally, what's it saying? They stopped growing personally, and immediately when they stop growing personally, what happens to their business? It starts dying. See, this is the answer to all this stuff. This is so good. 4 years. Okay, good. Well, I've been giving credit for that. Okay, but tell him he should be quit texting and listen to my broadcast. Shouldn't have his phone. Shouldn't have his phone, right? Tell him to grow up. All right? All right? All right? So I'm glad he is, but nobody else should be concerned with that, okay? Either way, I don't care if it's in 1 year or 4 years, that's still unbelievable, okay? So it doesn't matter. I mean, I wish everybody would pay attention to what matters, okay? It says, the people I meet aren't growing, listen to this, aren't growing, and also the ones who find life, are also the same ones who find life and their jobs boring. I've never seen anybody in Primerica get bored or want to get out when they're growing. Never. It never happened. It's when they stop growing, then everything around them, like it says here, gets boring. Why? Because they're doing the same thing over and over and over, look at the same people over and over and over, and pretty soon those people start leaving. And now it's not only boring, it's frustrating and depressing. And what could have solved it all? They would, if they would have just kept growing. And would you agree this is true in any business? And it's true in marriage and anything else. He says, without growth, he said, we're just going through the motions. And once again, go back to that thing. Remember we talked about this a couple weeks ago where you hit that little level here? Like entrepreneurs, once they hit that little comfort zone level, rather than bust through, it's the same thing with growth. See, once somebody gets into Primerica, would you agree most people do some changing initially? Would you agree with me on that? But the ones who keep growing, the ones who keep changing, the ones who don't grow, you just look at their lives, and I'm telling you, it's an unbelievable pattern, right? And he goes on and says, he said, and this guy was asking him a question. He said, so what I'm hearing you're saying is that how well I lead will be determined by the decision to grow or not. That's the whole thing we're talking about today. Okay? And he goes on to talk about the next challenge, stuff like that. So let me go through the 4 points he does, right? So here's the 4 points. I think it's on this next slide. Okay? It says if you're going to maximize your own growth as a leader, you got to start with yourself. Okay, and these are the 4 steps. Okay, let me go through self-knowledge. So this is the first one. He said, number one, you've got to gain knowledge. Okay, we all got to gain knowledge. Wisdom. Bob talks about that too. Gain knowledge and wisdom if we're going to grow. And it says Jesus grew both in stature and in wisdom. So you got to grow physical and outside for man, grow on the inside for God. But that's wisdom and discernment. And once again, that's the difference from being an animal where you don't grow. Same thing in Primerica. If your business is not growing, you're just digressing back to being like an animal because you're not using deductive reason. It's all on you. You're just not growing. Okay. So to gain knowledge, it starts with a commitment to become a student in several arenas. Okay, so right down here, you're becoming a student. We talked about this in a co-op meeting this morning. A student in several areas. Now, we talked about this morning when students go to class, most of them go to class simply to pass a test to get a diploma. Okay, now think about that. Some, though, pass a test because they don't just get a diploma, they want to make a lot of money in that field, so they want to be an expert. Okay, so some pass just do what? Get a diploma just to say I passed, or just even pass that test. Some do it so they can get a diploma so they have a degree so they can make money, use that degree. Okay, now some people, though, study and go to become students so they can actually teach what they're trying to learn. So when I started coaching, I was a student. Okay, I went to college to get a degree so I could teach. But when I started coaching, I became a student of my sport because I was going to have to teach that. Does that make sense to you? Same thing in the classroom, right? Okay, so write this down. So the first one is self-knowledge. Let me see what he says here. He says, if you're going to maximize your own growth as a leader, you need to start with yourself. Think of this as gaining self-knowledge. So that's point number one, self-knowledge. You'll need a very high self-awareness. And don't we talk about that? Don't we talk about that? Come on, guys, you got to help me. Don't we talk about that? Okay, so self-awareness, because you're not going to have self-knowledge if you don't have self-awareness. If you don't, to thine own self be true, if you're not honest with yourself, if you don't look at yourself and realize there's something wrong with me, you're not going to do this. You're not going to grow in this area of self-knowledge, okay? It says you'll need to be have very high self-awareness. What are your strengths? Okay, we all have strengths. What are your strengths? Some of y'all's strengths obviously ain't writing notes. What are your strengths? What are they, okay? And then what are your learning styles, okay? What are your preferences? What are your passions? How do you prefer to lead? And I'd ask yourself, how do you prefer to be led, right? And then he goes on and asks yourself, do you prefer that to be as a delegator, as a coach? I mean, what is it, okay? In other words, be aware of yourself. And then, look at everything like that, right? That's self-awareness based on what? We're talking about leadership. So you got to look at styles. Number 2, it's called, as if you're going to be leading others, okay, he said the next is you need to gain knowledge about the others that you want to lead. So the first one's about what? Yourself. What kind of leader you want to be? What's your style? What works? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses as a leader? So then the other one is what kind of people you want to lead. One of the things I do is I travel, I teach leadership. I go through all the traits about what a coach looks for in a player, and then everybody agrees with me on that, right? So I come up with all the different traits, and then I drop the bomb on them. Well, then you got to be the kind of player, the kind of leader that those players would want to play for. It's amazing how we want to find people that are competitive and energetic and compassionate and passionate, and yet as a leader, we're none of those things. So as a leader, are you becoming the kind of things that attract people? Now go back to Maxwell's laws. That's called the law of what? Attraction. You don't attract what you want, you attract what you are. We say, well, I don't know about that. I don't have anybody on my team. There you go. You're a 0, okay? Now don't get mad about that. Just raise your lid. You can't disagree with that, okay? So he goes on and says, what are their hopes? What are their dreams? What are their fears? What do you know about their families? Okay, go back and look at those type of things. What are their aspirations? What are their personality types? So you got to know your people, right? And then what you ought to do is think about what kind of people do you want to attract? And if you want to attract those kind of people, what do? You become that person, okay? Number 3, so he says you gain knowledge of your industry. So what do you know about your industry? Our business, the investments, insurance, recruiting, building, entrepreneurship. What do you really know about our industry? What is currently true about their industry? What is true about where's the trend? Where's it headed about things like our business? What are the strengths of our industry? Stuff like that, okay? Does that make sense? And then the last one he says, and this is where we're going to get into that other part, he says, finally, leaders need to constantly gain knowledge in the field of leadership. Doesn't that make sense? If we're supposed to be leaders, doesn't it make sense to study leadership? Is everybody with me on that? Okay. Doesn't it make sense to gain knowledge in leadership? Okay, so you ask yourself, what are you doing? What are you studying? What are you reading? Who are you emulating in the field of leadership? Who are you watching? Once again, who are you trying to be like? What skills do you need to acquire, you personally? And I think you need to study that. Okay, what are the trends in this? What are the best practices for you to be successful? So then, but this is kind of a neat example. I don't care if you write this down. I think it'd be good, but you don't have to. Here's what he does. He says, what are the continuing education, and what part of continuing education makes sense? By the way, here's another thing. He says, who is mentoring you? Who have you got close to that's allowing you to mentor you in the field of leadership? Now, what's the purpose of a mentor? Huh? Hold you accountable? Yeah. What else? Grow your lid. Exactly. Grow you so you can grow up and be a big boy, a big girl. So who are you allowing to mentor you in the field of leadership? Now, if you really are letting somebody mentor you, you would be doing what? Growing. Very good. So you can say, well, I've got somebody mentoring me. No, you may be sitting under somebody, but you're not really allowing them to mentor you. Okay, just think about the way Jesus Christ does if you understand anything about spirituality, Christianity. Not spirituality, totally different things. But remember the doorknob for becoming a believer? Okay, it's not on the outside. The Lord doesn't open it up and walk in. What does he do? He waits when you open the door and invite him in, he comes in. Sometime? All the time. But if you don't open that door and invite him in, he's knocking. But you got to open the door and let him in. Okay, that's mentorship. See, nobody's going to come into your life and make you learn. You got to, we're knocking. Every Monday, we're knocking. Every Fast Start School, we're knocking. Every time we meet, we're knocking. But if you don't open that door and let us in, there's not a mentor in your life. They're outside knocking. Now, how would we know you've opened that door? You'd be growing. And if not, you haven't opened the door. Doesn't mean mentor's not in your life. That doesn't mean mentor's not available. You have not opened the door and invited them in. You personally haven't done that. Therefore, only thing you know is what's inside your little house. That's it. Okay? So he uses this example. This is pretty cool. Let's see if I can get this right. Oh, he uses, I mean, I know most of y'all don't snow ski, but he uses the example of a snow skier, okay? He says, let's see, it says, all of these questions have answers, the ones I just went through you. Finding those answers is contingent on the choice the leader makes. Okay, do you make this choice? Whether to focus on gaining knowledge or remain complacent. Now that is something you ought to write down. You either focus on gaining knowledge, once again the Bible says gain wisdom, gain knowledge, or remain complacent. And see, he didn't say remain the same, he said remain what? Whew, that's a nasty word, isn't it? It's like a 4-letter word, but a lot more letters. And then he goes on and he says, this all sounds easier said than done. Those are a lot of questions. So we just posed a lot of questions to you, right? You're right, and it's not as easy as it sounds. But gaining knowledge isn't difficult like curing cancer or putting man on Mars. Let's see if I can think of a simple example. So he uses the example of a snow skier, right? So he says, let me go through this thing. He says, during competition, anybody ever seen a downhill slope thing? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. So he says, during competition, if you fail to make it around one of the gates, you're disqualified. Is that correct? And they say, yes. Okay, so here it is. He said, that's a perfect picture of what happens to a lot of leaders. It's so unfortunate that many leaders fail to grow their own knowledge and skills because of that. That's the first gate. So what's the first gate? Growing in your knowledge and skill. So you don't get around that one, you just disqualified yourself. You got to get around that one, right? And he says if you don't make it around that one, you're ultimately disqualified forever, okay? So what are some of the others? Says, why do leaders miss some things that are obvious? So here's what he gives you. He gives you some more points. What do downhill skiers miss? Why do downhill skiers miss a gate? Number one, he says, the most common reason is probably too much speed. Now, isn't that unusual? You think, well, what do you mean too much speed? And aren't you supposed to go down fast? Aren't you? But you also have to have mastery of your skills. Remember that what we talked about, right? So why would a skier have too much speed? Maybe he or she is pressing, trying to make up lost time. Okay? Maybe they don't have, they don't know their own limitations. So number one, he says, many leaders fail to gain knowledge because they have too much to do. They're going too fast and trying to accomplish. Now, this is what Howard Hendricks, one of the guys that mentored me, didn't know him personally, but I studied all of his men. He was the head of Dallas Seminary in Dallas, Texas. And he used to have his first meeting with all of his new pastors coming through his school, and he talked to them about being go-go boys. Now, I don't know if you remember the old days where they had the go-go girls up in little cages. Okay, in the 60s and 70s, if they had a movie on TV, Goldie Hawn was in there, and they were up in the cages dancing. They called them go-go girls. They had little high boots and stuff on and a little skirt, real frilly skirt, and they're up there dancing. Okay, called them go-go girls, which meant they never stopped what? Moving. They were always moving. Go-go. He said that to the people he was mentoring with the seminary. He said, some of y'all may never make it because you're like go-go boys, which means what? Go back to Covey. What's the 7th habit in highly effective people? Sharpen the saw. Take time to sharpen the saw. So you can be going so fast in Primerica that you're not getting better. You're not sharpening the saw. You're not reading the 300 books in 4 years. Did I get it right for all you nerds? Okay. So he's not reading the 300 books in 4 years. You're not reading any books. You're just going on the fly. You're not getting any better. You're not taking time to spend time with your people. You're not doing the things you need to do. You're not asking for help. You're not doing your day planner. You're not doing your autopsy. Why? You're so busy. You don't have 5 minutes to do your autopsy. I'll bet you I'm right about this. I bet you if I took a survey and pulled all your day planners up right now, I bet maybe 3, 4, 5 at the most have done your daily autopsy every day and your weekly autopsy now for the first 3 weeks. I'll bet I'm right. So which means you're saying you're not even taking time to map out your life. And you're going to go forward doing the same thing, and the half the year is going to be over, and the year is going to be over, and you were complacent. You stayed the same. Actually, you probably went backwards. Just because you were so busy doing other things, you didn't take time to do what was important. And so you're not strategic about your life. Okay? Number 2, lack of preparation. So one was, you're going too fast, not taking the time to do what you should be doing, not knowing your limitations, that kind of stuff. Number 2 was lack of preparation. They may have not studied the course enough. And he goes on and says, and you're just simply unwilling to grow. You're not taking time to study, to get better. Okay? And you're going to miss a gate. Number 3 talks about distractions. And by the way, this doesn't necessarily mean bad distractions. Obstacles. It doesn't necessarily mean bad obstacles, right? Like you could have somebody that's passed in your business, okay, or somebody that you've lost a loved one, or maybe you've had an injury, this, that, and those are bad, tough distractions. Would you agree? Maybe you flunked a test, maybe a bunch of people quit, whatever, right? Those are distractions. But can you have good distractions and obstacles? Yeah. How about a child being born? Now you understand that's a good thing, but is that a distraction and an obstacle? You know it is, because that's going to take more of your time. How about a holiday? Those are fun things. Would you agree? But it's going to take more of your time. So these are distractions and obstacles, right? So that might be one, right? External factors, internal factors, that determines if you make it or not. Then he goes on and says that the next one he says is that the biggest one is that to consistently gain knowledge as a leader, we've got to focus on growing ourselves. And so that's the big one. He said, you don't focus. So like a skier going down the hill, can you imagine if they take their eye off that next gate? They lose focus, or they think about the fact they almost fell in the last one, or they look over and then somebody else has beat them. They're thinking, or they got anything else in their mind. Will they have a higher probability of missing the next gate? Okay, same with us in this room. We lose focus, and we don't stay on course, and we miss the gate, and we're disqualified. Okay, does that make any sense at all? Okay, now let me kind of wrap this thing up, and I hope you'll have a lot of discussions after we after we finish this. But let me read this to you right here, and it might make a little more sense, okay? It says, have you ever felt like you could lead at a higher level, but you weren't quite sure how to get there? So have you ever felt that way, right? Have you ever wondered how to strengthen your influence and increase your impact? Have you ever considered what enables some leaders to soar while others are not doing anything? And he says, we're convinced after more than 70 years of combined leadership, this is to author this book, that the path to increase influence, impact, and leadership effectiveness is paved with personal growth. Guys, this is so good, it's unbelievable. There's certainly more to leadership than growth, but growth is at the heart of everything that creates and sustains great leaders. Growth is the leader's fountain of youth. Isn't that something? So what is he saying? If you want to stay young, you want to stay relevant, you got to keep growing. And it goes back to the thing, think about the fountain of youth. Because people get what? Older. And this is the fountain of youth. Can you imagine how much money you could make in this world if you could really, truly find the fountain of youth? I'd buy into it in a second. Okay, and I think some of the rest of y'all would. If you're really honest with yourself, you'd probably like to find it for some of your parents. So well, this is the same thing. So what is he saying the fountain of youth is in leadership? Growth. You got to grow, right? Because you're not going to grow the business if you don't grow. He says, growing for a leader is like oxygen to a deep sea diver. Without it, you die. He says, unlike the diver, you won't physically die, but you will stop growing in your influence. You will erode. And we talk about that. You see a lot of people in Primerica, they have eroding leadership. They have no influence on their people below them because they have no relevancy, because they've stopped growing. They have no what? No value. And so those people put their time and money somewhere else. And it could be a lot of, even at your level. And it says, he says, you can, listen to this, this is sad. He said, the erode, he said, and over time, you can even lose the opportunity to lead at all. That would be scary. And he says, tragically, you see these losses in organizations large and small, for profit and for nonprofit, leaders who attain a position of leadership and fail to keep growing. They just don't keep it up. Or some get a promotion based on their potential, but they never materialize. They don't ever reach it. They're just, what Zig Ziglar said, they're stuck in the squat, like that biscuit. When you slam the door, and it just stayed down in the squat. It didn't rise up, right? Some of you don't know what I mean by that. I shouldn't use that example. Some of you suckers think he's really, and he goes on and says, or perhaps you see it in, we're about done, young emerging leaders who never even gave it a shot. And they could have been somebody special. It says their untapped potential remains untapped. Now, wouldn't that be a hell of a note to say about you the rest of your entire life? And it's not just the new people now. How about the fact that some people get and grow, and they still had that potential to grow the next level, but they stayed there? To me, that's even worse, because they knew how to grow. They just refused to keep growing. See, to me, it's different when somebody gets in and they really don't know how to grow. Yeah, you have untapped potential, but you know what? That's not as sad as somebody gets in, they know how to grow, right? But then you don't do it. So he goes on and he says, what do all these situations have in common? Personal growth or the lack of it. The failure to grow sabotages the career of more leaders than anything else. Our capacity to grow determines our capacity to lead. And this is a leadership business. So hopefully everybody listening to us around the country will take time afterwards and talk about these issues, because this is critical. If we're going to have a breakthrough year in 2016, we got a breakthrough year in the way we see leadership and growth. Okay? All right.